Emily Dickinson's long self-quarantine has been gaining relevance in our society with regard to her life and social involvement. Contrasting and even contradicting views exist among her contemporaries as well as later critics. People who were near to her always asserted her normal behavior and interest in social events. Her friend and sister-in-law Susan reiterates that normal life was among Emily's profoundest yearnings. In the Away Home poem, we find this yearning of Emily. She finds it difficult to adjust with the nostalgic distance from her home, like the parents who cannot forget their children's faces even though the children have moved away. Absence from society was not her luxury. She always wanted to be with her own, but she takes up the more ascetical choice of staying at a distance. Her withdrawal was gradual and total. Her society considered her like a myth, and debates took place whether or not she was sane or insane. Dickinson asserts the normal behavior of Dickinson. During the annual party, her father used to arrange for the renowned personalities of pharmacists, where Emily emerged from her wanted retirement and did her part as a gracious hostess. Views of Theodore Ward and John Crowe Ransom are also relevant in this regard. There are views of people like Mrs. Bingham, who considers Emily's gradual withdrawal as a natural response to her surroundings. Thomas Johnson thinks it was part of stratagem rather than eccentricity. Majority of critics agree with William Sherwood's observation that Emily's sensibility was a coherent and consistent one. Emily considered her poems were letters to the world that never wrote to her. Her life was more like her own poem, J303, that the soul selected the society, then closed its door. Sitting in her home, she could travel to Italy, Brazil, India, Alps mountains, and other remote areas via her poetry. She always wanted her special guests and friends be entertained by her succinct notes and encapsulated poetical lines. Being at a distance, Emily was a keen observer and critic of the contemporary social life. Dickinson Homestead was among the prominent households of Hamest, so news and details of events happening in society reached Emily on time. She responded in a unique manner to these ripples of the society. For example, 1862 was the full year of American Civil War, and we find Emily growing more recluse and starting to write huge number of poems. Her era of prolific writing starts in the same year of 1862. The data from the social events and experiences is calibrated to a higher level in Dickinson poems. Emily believed that her visual physique was not mandatory to render the communication. She wanted her poems to stand alone without reference to her personal life. She was sure that the future generations will be entertained by the combitless show of her poems. We live in an era which likes to decipher Emily Dickinson's poems and letters in an independent light without too much emphasis on the background reasons, events related to the time of composition. This approach gives the poems power and beauty of their own. To conclude, I would like to bring an analogy between two of her poems. She argues in J 1543, F 1573, obtaining but our own extent, that the personal expanse or the extended interiority of Jesus grows and resurrects himself from the dead. The poem J 290, F 319 of Bronze and Blaze tells us that the poet from a distant island would entertain the centuries to come through the splendor of her poetry. Comparing these two poems, we can analogously say that poems are like the extended interiority of Emily, which would reach out to engage, entertain, and communicate with the generations to come. Thank you.